Hi, this is Boki, and I'm back. I guess I unofficially took a hiatus from YouTube for a few weeks. Just a lot of stuff was happening, and then I had some technical issues with my camera. But in that time, I did film a review of Korean drama. I have some videos planned to film and post also in the next few weeks, so there will be more stuff coming out soon. But I also kind of took sort of an accidental break from watching booktube videos, and not for any real reason, it just happened. But in the past few days, I have been watching some of the discussion videos that people have posted about book hauls, which was really interesting to me as someone who doesn't do book hauls. I have sort of in the back of my mind wondered what people like about book hauls, why they are so popular. The three videos that I watched, which I'll link to below, the first one was Ariel Bassette's video, which I feel like was probably the originator of a lot of this discussion. And she talked about why she likes book hauls, what she gets out of them, why she thinks that they're so popular in the community, and why she thinks they're so valuable. The next video was Vanessa at Split Reads. She talked a little bit more in depth kind of on the community aspect of book hauls and how they're sort of part of a language that is part of the booktube culture and how we use that as a way to bond. And the last was the Minimalist Booktuber, who I think kind of came at it from a perspective that I'm more familiar with, and that I'm maybe more in line with, which is sort of the conscious consumerism aspect of why she actually doesn't buy that many books. Like I said, I'm not really a book haul person. For one thing, I don't buy many books. They're also not a video that I watch that often. If I watch book hauls, they tend to be for people whose videos I watch with regularly or people who I interact with regularly on BookTube, just because I feel like there's sort of a sense of continuity. There's sort of a sense of like, okay, these are the books that I might see on their channel in the next few weeks. I really liked Ariel and Vanessa's videos for being able to explain a little bit more of what other people get out of them, why they make them, why they watch them, why they are so popular. I hadn't really thought that much about the ways that they are so quick and appealing for people to both watch and make, how they require kind of very little buy-in from the audience. I don't think I'm necessarily going to start watching book hauls more now, but I think they have changed my perspective on kind of the place that they serve as part of the booktube community. But I think the Minimalist Booktuber raised a lot of really valid points about kind of the way that we consume books, and especially the way that we consume them in terms of actually spending money on them. And I think through all of these videos, I actually started comparing a lot of what we do with book hauls to kind of my other YouTube slash consumer hobbyish thing, which is makeup. Hauls are a huge part of beauty culture. Whether you're on Instagram or Reddit or YouTube, people will go shopping, or they will go to Sephora, they will buy stuff online, get it delivered, or come back with shopping bags full of makeup and just show what they bought. And maybe they'll show some swatches where they'll show like, this is what the color is like, this is what the finish is like. But for the most part, it is just kind of people showing that, I have this item, I just bought it, I just spent money on it. There's kind of like a clear, objective, removed from all sense of emotion value to hauls, both with like beauty and with books. It's kind of just knowing what things are out there. I think with beauty, with makeup, like especially for products that are really hard to find, hauls can be a really cool way to find, where certain things are sold. With books, sometimes all you want to know is the summary. You don't need a review to know if you're interested in a book. I also agree with the least cynical take on hauls in general, which is that we're all just excited to talk about this thing that we love with other people who love it. A lot of us, whether it's books, whether it's makeup, we might have people in real life who sort of get it, but they don't completely get it. The great thing about the internet is that it's really easy to find people who love what you love the same way that you love it, to the same degree, with the same level of obsessiveness. And that happens with so many different types of hobbies, not just, makeup and books. Even though I've been saying like, I don't really make videos of hauls, I do take pictures of things that I've bought, like makeup wise or book wise, and post them on Instagram. Like, I am totally in that camp of like just being excited about things that I have and wanting to like share them with people who might also be excited. So to the extent that I get hauls and I participate in them, there is also a certain extent to which they make me uncomfortable. I am definitely implicated in this. This definitely applies to the way that like, I may take pictures of like books that I bought or makeup that I bought, which is sort of like that conspicuous consumption that hauls are so clearly a part of. Yes, I get that we bond over hauls, but I also am uncomfortable with the fact that we bond over how we spend money. Like, and especially how we spend money on physical objects that we can show off to each other. My goal is really, I think with this video, just to discuss it, just to talk about it, and to ask, why is it that, you know, spending money is a thing that we bond over? Because as people have pointed out, library hauls are not as popular as book hauls. They don't really seem to have taken off. Maybe if you just called a library book haul a book haul, people would watch it as much. I'm not really sure. So there is this trend in the YouTube beauty world, and I think in other beauty communities, that is starting to gain some more traction, which is the anti-haul. And the person who kind of, I think, launched this into the popularity that it's starting to get is Kimberly Clark, who is a really great beauty YouTuber. I will link to her first anti-haul below. The point of this anti-haul is to talk about, as she says it, what I'm not going to buy. Like she says, I don't need it, I'm not gonna buy it. And her reasons are usually with makeup, things like, you know, how it's advertised, how it's produced, you know, questions of ethics, marketing, and also just like, do I actually need this? Like, if I do have 50 other red lipsticks, do I need another one? I think what she does really well is not express judgment on anybody for wanting to buy these things, but just to stress the ways that she is trying to be mindful about her consumption and to kind of ease the pressure that a lot of, I think, the online beauty community has to make people want to buy more makeup. I think the reason that they've kind of gained some more popularity is in response to a lot of that, you know, FOMO culture that has become a part of the way people talk about makeup online. So the question that I've been trying to build to with this long ass introduction is this: could we have anti-hauls for books? Like, could that ever be a part of the booktube community? I am not saying that I want one or that I need one, because I actually think the answer is no. But I'm not entirely sure about this, which is why I'm posing it here. I think that contradiction is really interesting to me, so I'm going to talk out why I think this is true and how I think that maybe applies to book hauls and how we view them, and why we maybe don't always want to turn a critical eye to the way that we spend our money on books. I think, for one thing, books and makeup are not sold in the same way, they're not marketed in the same way, and the way that people buy them are not the same. Frequency of releases is very different. There are so many more books put out there. Books don't really go away, like they're not limited editions, so you don't worry about them being sold out in the way that like you can miss out on whatever, I don't know, highlighter that's being put out. I think one of the big things is that, and that's like a huge difference, is that with makeup, saying I'm not gonna buy makeup is the same thing basically as saying I'm not going to use this makeup. Those things are inherently linked together, unless you're a shoplifter, in which case I guess questions of ethical consumption are taking on a whole new level for you. But for books, there is a distinction between like using / reading a book and buying it. Like, you can very easily legally read a book without ever paying money for it, and it's called the library, and it's great. And like I've said in other videos, and it's probably really boring to hear me repeat it again, I personally don't want to buy books unless I know I love them, which means that I tend to buy books that I've already read. There are some like notable exceptions at this point. I just bought the Jean by Siddhartha Mukherjee because I have been wanting to read it, and I didn't want to deal with like holds at the library, and I love his writing anyways, so I was just like, whatever, I'm gonna spend the money on it. Same with Antony and Cleopatra from Shakespeare. I mean, I didn't know that I was gonna love it, but like, I knew it was Shakespeare and it was recommended to me and I wanted to read it on a flight. So I was like, you know what, like it's also like was like $5 and I'm probably not going to give it away at any point. So I was fine with paying money for it. I don't really like the feeling of buying books and then getting rid of them. Like, I don't want to stock my house with things that I'm just gonna throw away. I'm not saying that I think other people should do it this way. It's just a thing that has been working for me. Kind of going on to the latter side of this distinction, the idea that you won't ever read a book. There are like, you know, top 5 Wednesdays and I think some tag videos where these questions will come up, like what author will you never read, or what books will you never read, or what series will you never read. And I think those are cool. I think they're interesting. I think I've like talked about authors I'll never read before, but I don't see them becoming a regular feature on YouTube, on BookTube, the way that it does, the way that it has on beauty channels, like in the form of an anti-haul, for a few reasons. As much as we like, you know, strong negative opinions about things because they're kind of fun, I think there's only so much you can say about books you're not going to read before it basically sounds like you're being willfully ignorant. You know, there's this whole sense of like, you can't really know if this book is worthwhile to read if you don't actually read it. I think there are like really extreme cases where like people in the book world agree that they don't want a certain book to like be bought. Like when Simon & Schuster was signed on Milo Yiannopoulos. I think a lot of people agreed that, you know, this guy who spewed a lot of very hateful speech should maybe not be given a platform, not like as any form of censorship, but just like given the opportunity to profit off of his hatred for people. To a lesser extent, maybe things like Twilight, 50 Shades of Grey. There are books that like kind of incite a lot of judgment from people who say that I am never going to read this. But I think it's hard to be able to say that on a repeated basis without sounding like you're just being like an asshole. And I don't think that exists for things like makeup. This is like, I think, inherently obvious, but there is a value that we assign to books that does not get applied to, you know, makeup or fashion. And I'm not here to argue that books and makeup are the same, that they should be the same. But I do think that the differences in how we assign value to them means that we assess our consumption of them differently, even though they can sometimes, you know, be just as mindless as each other. And to be clear, I am not arguing that we should stop buying books at all. Like, I am more likely to spend more money on makeup in the upcoming year than I am on books, but I do still feel like, you know, I'm gonna get just as much value out of all of the free books that I read that I am on makeup, but that's just based on me and how I want to spend my money. And I don't think that there's anything better about that than how other people choose to spend their money. It is up to you to like spend your money in a way that like supports your values and works with your budget. I just think that sometimes because of the value that we give to books, you know, both like in society, the kind of romanticization of books, it means that sometimes we can overlook the fact that books are sold to us. They are marketed towards us. They are hyped towards us. When publishers, you know, advertise a book, it's not just because they think that the book is going to have this broad societal impact or personal impact for you. It's because they want you to spend money on the book so that they can have more money. That's not like a bad thing. That's not a cynical thing, to me at least. Like, publishers are trying to make money because they want to bring more books to you. And so it just makes me wonder sometimes about the way that we treat the consumption of books as like inherently valuable just because we're buying books. And like, obviously it gets more complicated than that. It's not as simplistic as like, you know, don't buy things or, you know, don't show off when you buy things. Because, you know, questions of buying books are also rooted in, you know, questions of supporting like local bookstores and all of these other aspects. I do also want to say that for me personally, being mindful of what I spend my money on was very important for my mental health, and that kind of carries over into a lot of the things that I'm talking about in this video. I think like if you've had experience with anxiety and depression, maybe you understand this, but sometimes when you're in those kind of not so great places, buying things seems like a really easy way out. Like, it's gonna be a thing that makes you feel good for a few seconds because that rush of buying and having a new thing. And that's the excitement that kind of translates over into hauls that I think like we're bonding over. And I think it's like great if it's something you can engage with in like a healthy way. But I think sometimes when you're using that as like a crutch, it can, especially when you're in a state of anxiety or depression, it can be unhealthy. It's really easy to use shopping and self-care as like analogous things, and sometimes they can be, but I think if they are going to be, you have to do them in really mindful ways that are difficult sometimes when anxiety and depression are at like their full swing. Which doesn't mean that every purchase has to be this great thought out purchase. It just means that I have to be a little bit more aware of, you know, why I'm spending my money and what my budget looks like. Just for me, for my mental health, that has made a huge difference. And it's not like the cure-all for it, it's not the cure for anxiety, but it is part of the cycle for me of just being more mentally aware. I'm kind of getting into that like territory that is better occupied by therapists, so I don't want to get too hard into it, but these are issues that get to be very complicated, they get to be very personal. So I'm not meaning this as a blanket statement about mental health and shopping at all. Just because you see people buy a lot of stuff does not mean that they are trying to cover up some kind of I don't know, mental distress. Maybe it is, maybe it isn't, but you can't decide that based off of like one haul video. So anyway, that's like a side tangent. But that's why I feel like I never want to just be like, well, book hauls are good because they build community. Like, I agree with that. I just also think it's worthwhile to ask why. And why would it be so hard to do like the opposite of a book haul? Why would it be hard to do an anti-haul? Like, and for me, like having kind of been a part of like different consumer like online communities, there is definitely the feeling of like if I see other people buying a lot of things, I also think that I want to buy a lot of things, and it's not until later that I like step back and think, no, you only want that because that person made it look like buying the thing was fun, but it's not necessarily going to be fun for you. I am still neutral on hauls, I think, and I reserve the right to change my mind on that, but for now I can't imagine that really changing. But I do think that the discussion videos that I mentioned, like I said, I think they have kind of made me more aware of what other people get out of that. And so maybe in a few weeks I will change my mind. Maybe I'll start watching them more regularly. So yeah, this was more kind of an open discussion. I'm really curious if you do hauls or you don't do hauls. What are your reasons for that? What kind of things when you're buying books do you look for? If you think that anti-hauls could work in the book community, if there's a way you think that they could apply, I am also really curious about that as well. So yeah, anything that you want to argue with me about, question me on, debate me on, do that below. We can also talk on Twitter or Instagram. I will have my usernames for that below as well. Thank you for watching, and yeah, bye. So I was recording, but then my camera's internal temperature got too high, and I took a break, and of course, look at this asshole. Those are my notes he's sitting on. He is never gonna let me finish this video, 'cause he's an asshole.